Right, well, I think it's been a little while since we've had one of our little reasonings.
Oh,
They're good. People like them. Yeah, people like them, and they're interested in the way we think, in the way we come to reason these things. And just, it's not about finding all the answers, it's about making people think for themselves. Because that's what's really needed. You don't need a Superman going around thinking for the people. You need everyone to learn from Superman, I suppose. You know what I mean?
I've been looking through the Dhammapada recently. It's got a few like aphorisms in it. It's full of it. It's like Psalms.
Mm-hmm.
Without so much dogma attached.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good that 9 out of 10 BT and
So-
customers would recommend it to friends and family. Don't miss out on the
That's interesting that you say dogma. I was having a conversation this week with somebody and they put up one of those memes. You know what a meme is?
Meme,
Yeah.
M-E-M-E.
Yeah.
It's like a gene,
Yeah,
except it's for the mind. It says that there's certain things in the collective unconscious which passes down generationally.
well, on Facebook, yeah, you're right, it's psyops. Sociology and psychology mixed. But in the message, a picture says 1,000 words. So on Facebook, you can share a picture with words embedded in a picture, a photograph basically, like a poster. Yeah, and on this meme, they put, see, God, oh, so God doesn't condone slavery, doesn't he? Exodus 21. Oh, and the women servants shall not go free, like the manservants, you know, except that a certain deal be done. Otherwise, the man that did that deal
I think the
broke the
Bible's
law.
pretty much like
Wait,
a book
wait.
for children.
Well, it is. But are we not children? Does God not say
No, I think-
the children?
Yeah, but I think there's time when we've got to deal with our responsibilities as adults,
Yeah,
and that's not to refer to the rights and wrongs of a book.
yeah.
When at the end of the day, as an adult, you're expected to think for yourself. As an adult, do you
but-
think slavery is condonable?
Well, first of all, I had to question. The first thing is God doesn't condone anything. You say God, these writings in this book means God condones slavery. No. I think you'll find that man.
Yeah.
Man.
A set of men finds it in their interest to promote this.
Well, wait a minute, because doing the history and doing the research, you can even do it on Wikipedia, just getting a basic insight into it, and you compare King James Version and other versions. Some versions call them servants, some versions call them slaves. If you was looking at an old term, I don't know, terms of service, an employment contract, then in the olden times, you was either called a servant or a slave, depending on which book you're reading. And because it was common practice amongst other cultures, it was common practice. It wasn't seen as wrong. Now, I'm going to make an example in a minute that will show you why things have changed. But first of all, people that are reading that are reading the Old Testament, and not only are they reading the Old Testament, they're reading some of the very first civilizations that was ever mentioned in Exodus. Yeah, just before that, you know, you had the 10 Commandments, Exodus 20, and then Exodus 21. At 21, it's an elaboration of laws, tithes, rules of behaviour amongst that civilization. Now, I don't know if the two sets of rules were done at the same time, because it seems a bit contrary to have the 10 Commandments, which is, you know, first commandment, love no other God but me. Second commandment, love thy neighbour as thyself, and everything else after that really affirms the second commandment. Human relations based on wisdom.
So you say the first commandment is to love God,
Yeah.
and the second one's to love your neighbour as yourself. That's what
Or your enemy as
Christ
yourself.
is credited. But if you actually look and read the 10 Commandments, the second one's to do with God as well. It's not your neighbour yet.
Okay.
Fair enough. Fair enough. That's also true.
The two commandment quote is, which is the most important commandment.
Mm-hmm.
Especially our species. I love you,
And he said,
Well, I'm not going to get into that so much about which is the most important. What I'm saying is that if you, like me, agree that that is an innate sense of goodness and well-being along what we commonly agree that's a good person, then wouldn't that conflict and contradict with slavery? Were those people condoning an evil act straight after receiving the Ten Commandments? Now, I don't necessarily think that's so, because first of all, there's a big difference between a servant, someone you employ, and a slave, someone who has no choice and doesn't receive wages. You know? So we've got to be very careful, because none of us are alive at that time to confirm. We're just using hearsay, and that's the problem. However, if you accept that that's written, if you accept that the Bible is actually telling an accurate history of man, and in some cases, sometimes you don't want to hear what man's doing because it's wrong. Look at how we've grown, or maybe not grown, about the idea of slavery, you know, and recognizing it in all its different forms and its many facets. Time has allowed us to do that. We're not as fortunate as the Creator, you know, knowing all things and being all-knowing. We've had to discover everything through mishap, interpretation, accidents, things just falling in our lap. You know, every single thing we've got stands on the shoulders of giants. Every single invention, and the invention that comes after that, relies on what come before it. The idea that came before it can be reverse engineered and put into a new idea that makes both ideas even better. So by, I suppose, reverse engineering the Bible, you look at it and say, well, this is where we've come from. Do you deny where you come from? Because that would be the height of ignorance. To see that, yes, we had Old Testament. Yes, man has used religion in a way that we today would call that wrong. But what does that actually prove? That proves that when Christ came with the New Testament, it was very relevant. Very relevant. Just as we can look back and say, oh, such and such is wrong. Well, Christ did the same thing. So we've come full circle in a way. It's like we've had our Old Testament. That's how everyone's been living. So when you say the Bible is for children, yes, I agree. The laws are for children, but they're also for adults. And the difference between the adult and the child is that the child probably questions the law and wonders, why do we have that law? The adult, not only do they want to be an example to the child of why they should be obedient to the law, put your seatbelt on. Well, I'm not putting my seatbelt on. What example is that? You know? I'm saying to the child, oh, don't you endanger yourself, but meanwhile, I, the adult, will be a hypocrite and endanger myself.
Well, maybe Nietzsche would say that you endanger yourself when you pick up and read the New Testament.
Okay.
It says it's a book to be handled with gloves.
And what does the Bible say? That it comes not to join us together,
the weakening of the spirit,
but to divide us.
What's that?
The Bible itself, you know, and is it the Revelations and the Book of Daniel? Says, you know, it's come not to necessarily unite the human race, but to divide us along these lines of morality.
Again,
I'm saying
some people would say that morality is such a term which should be disposed of as sanitarily as possible. It's a deplorable concept.
Morality is a deplorable concept. Why?
Which good morality has there been?
Well, that's a good question. What good morality has there been? Well, I guess there's been some good morality, because here we are, an unbroken chain of ancestors.
Against the odds.
Definitely. Definitely, and that's
almost every
single human life is a lottery. It's a miracle winning.
Contemporaneously. Every contemporaneous morality has not necessarily worked to our advantage, and yet despite the odds.
Well, hence why some people think that it's God that condones slavery, when clearly God, the Creator, no. because nobody's spoken to God like that. And if you ask, actually, God's revealing the same virtues. You said there's no morality. I think there is. I think that a lot of it is still to be discovered. A lot of it has already been discovered, and therefore is being rediscovered. You see, new questions arise when new technology comes about, and that's what confuses people, because they're distracted by how the thing looks, how the technology is perceived, when in actual fact the moral and the message of the story is exactly one and the same. That's why I keep going back to the power of myth is where the Bible's greatest strength lies, because taking it just as a myth, as a story to learn from, these things happen to people, and look what happened, or look what happened, look what happened.
Yeah, but that isn't that what you're saying though? Is where it's the Bible's greatest strength lies, or its greatest strength ain't lying.
Well, actually, it's probably the greatest strength lies in you.
If you were
in
to
the
take the New
individual.
Testament and you were to take the novel sayings of the Messiah, that's one thing. The sayings are one thing. The doing and the being of the Messiah is the other. Now, if that leads to a church state, which is pretty much the same as the old priestly state anyway, it's not a question of doing, it's a question of believing. It's not a question of being, it's a question of deferred faith almost, the giving of tithes and the reducing of into a religion instead of like
well, that's what Old Testament gives us, isn't it? Through those laws, through those because it limits your reality for a start, doesn't it?
If Moses goes up on the mountain and calls the people up and they refuse to go, saying let you be our intercessor, that's exactly the wrong thing. Yeah. So then you've got.
But don't forget, the people asked for the Matrix, didn't they?
Yeah, but that's just a film as well. That's just another myth.
Well, I'm using that as a metaphor. The people asked for the Bible. The people asked for those laws, believe it or not.
To look at the story, it's like, what are you going to do with people who aren't prepared to meet God? You've got to give them laws and stuff which they don't understand, and if it's lip service.
What year are we talking about? We're talking about Moses.
We're talking about right now.
I know, but the beginning of human civilization, as I suppose the Bible explains it, the beginning of the Western religion, the Western philosophies, 4,000, 5,000 years ago.
I mean, if morality is all of that thing you always bring up, what would Jesus do? Then isn't that a deplorable morality?
Why?
Where's the self in that? Where's the self-responsibility of that? Where's the self-thought of that? Where's the thinking capacity of that person? What would Jesus do? That's still a set of codified things, authorized sayings or whatever from God knows when and wherever. It's like hand over your brain on a plate.
Well, you say that, but who can find fault and blame in what Jesus had come to do? What had he really come to do?
The message was to say, follow in these footsteps and be me, be like me, understand like me,
draw near to the Father. I disagree, because Christ always spoke about doing the thing.
Your eyes and be like me, be me. Take up your cross and follow me. Don't just repeat the sayings that I do, but do what I do. Right.
Well, better to give than to receive. Yeah.
What's the good of me telling you about my father if you're not willing to know the father for yourself?
Right. Well, do you not think he had some interesting ways? I mean, we're talking about man.
We're talking Messiah, yeah. I recognise that.
Man being educated by his fellow man.
I do have some interesting ways, but what are you going to do with fellow man?
Observe.
With them.
Observe. Well, this is why I come back now full circle. You look at the example given, the metaphor, the power of the myth, the story that's told. Either you accept that was the history and how they was living, or you don't. That's number one. If you've got a question with that because of your own beliefs, then really you're missing the point. I mean, it's not to say that, don't teach me anything new about morality, but you have to go back to the beginning to get to now.
It's just prohibition, censorship.